Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
The First Lady of New York Radio, Joan Hamburg, entertaining and informative. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Says she loves me, yes, yes she does. Gonna show me tonight, yeah. She got the way to move me, cherry. She got the way to move me. She got the way to move me, cherry, baby. She got the way to move me. All right.
One of the big hits on Broadway is a show that has the crowds coming. People love it. The music is divine. The acting is great. So is the actor who's doing all this, Will Swenson, starring in A Beautiful Noise, the Neil Diamond story. And, you know, many of us growing up sort of fixated on stars or singers or whatever, actors, dancers, and no exception was Will Swenson. Wasn't your dad, Will, when you were growing up, really a big fan of Neil Diamond? You had heard that music since you were a little kid.
Yes, I did, and he still is a massive fan and listens to Neil every day. It's kind of blown his mind that I'm a part of this project because, yeah, Neil is my dad's favorite singer of all time. So I grew up with it in the home probably every day.
Oh, my gosh. It was in your DNA, right?
Yes, it was. It was and still is.
So how ironic that you would end up at one point in your really interesting career where you're working all the time and a leading man in so many different things, that there you would be with Neil right in your pocket, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it felt in a way like I'd been training for it my whole life because I certainly knew all of the songs long before this was ever a project. In fact, I didn't tell my dad that I was involved in this project for fear that it could fall apart and not happen because I didn't want to get his hopes up.
Oh,
Eventually, when I knew it was a sure thing, I finally told him.
Was he there opening night?
He sure was. I mean, he called me every day leading up. How's it going? How's it going?
Oh.
And I was able to introduce him to Neil Diamond. And at 86 years old, my dad told me that was the best day of my life. So that was pretty,
can you believe
it?
It's amazing. And how much fun
great.
for you, too, like to fulfill his early dreams. And because people do become obsessed with their favorites.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it was terrific. It was an amazing night for me, and to get to do that for my dad was just icing on the cake. Yeah.
And you started very young in this crazy business?
I did. Yeah, my grandma was a playwright in the 50s and 60s, and she started a small theater in Southern California that ran for 70 years or so. And so my family was a theater family. And I grew up in Glendale, California until I was 12, and they threw me on stage when I was, 2 years old. And so I was just always around it and ended up going into the family business.
So to speak. And Grandma Ruth was also an actor.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was great. She directed many of the shows, and she wrote them and performed in them. She was a great, great lady.
Now, somewhere I read that you weren't an Army brat, but you traveled constantly when you were a kid through your whole childhood. How come?
Well, we just moved a little bit. My dad was switching professions. I was born in Utah, and we moved to Colorado for a bit for him to teach at a college, and then we moved to Southern California, where he went to chiropractic school, and then we moved back to Salt Lake City to start a small theater when I was 12 years old. So, we moved 4 or 5 times, and that was not a happy thing for a 12-year-old. What's that?
Not at all. I said that's tough for a kid, especially a pre-adolescent kid at 12.
Yeah, I wasn't too happy about it.
No,
at the time.
I can imagine. My kids didn't even want to move apartments. No, we don't want it. All our friends. I said, you're in an apartment. You live near the bus stop. The kids will come over whenever they're taking a bus. But no, kids, it's really tough. But what about the acting bug? You went to Brigham Young, and I can't sort of picture that as a big theater school, or was it?
They have a pretty good musical theater program there. BYU is a Mormon school, and I grew up Mormon, and the Mormon folks just have a love for the arts, and a lot of kids spend their after school hours going to dance lessons or singing lessons or music lessons. So everybody was pretty involved in that kind of thing, and I think as a result, BYU has a lot of really talented kids. So they had a pretty good department, and I went just as an acting student to start, and then quickly kind of switched into the musical theater groove. And kind of tried to develop my singing voice, which I hadn't taken very seriously until college. And I thought, there's a lot more musicals produced than straight plays. So that's where I was, and that was where I kind of launched my little acting career from there.
Well, it's not such a little acting career, but when you were, your 11, 12-year-old self, and everyone was sort of involved in theater, and particularly a grandma and your grandfather, they were both playwrights too. So did you resent when they wanted to cast you and you were also available?
It depended on the moment. Sometimes I was desperately interested in being in a certain production, and other times if they wanted me to be in it, I was like, no, I'm going to play football. So, sometimes it felt like doing the chores. Especially because sometimes they would make me, sell candy out front or be a stage manager. And I wasn't nearly as interested in that stuff as I was being on stage. But
I'm sure.
Yeah, it was fun.
But were they happy when you started working and started getting parts?
Yeah, definitely. To make a living out of it and kind of leave the nest and go to New York and eventually be someone that's working on Broadway. I think that my family is really, really happy and proud of me.
Well, they should be. When you first moved to New York, was it hard to find work or did you fall into things?
Yeah, it was a little tricky. My first professional job I got out of college was at Disney World. I got my equity card playing Gaston in the Beauty and the Beast show at Disney World.
Right.
And I remember family coming down there to visit and then saying, well, what are you really going to do with your life, when this falls apart? And and I was like, no, I'm really going to go for it. And then I got a couple of tours, and I was like, all right, it's time to move to New York and make that big move. And I thought for sure things would click, but it took me 4 years of living in the city before I got my first ensemble job on Broadway. And then I was an understudy for several years and a swing in a couple of Broadway shows. And then finally got a lead in the musical Hair on Broadway, and that's when things started to go a little better for me.
Yeah, but you know what's so interesting? Some of my kids are involved in the theater and acting and film and the whole bit. And my daughter-in-law, I would hear her talk about her friends, all actors then, and they would say, if we don't make it by 28 or whatever, that's when we know we're going to leave. But you didn't. You hung on through a lot of stuff, and coming to New York is not so easy, right? I mean, you didn't have that many contacts here initially.
It's not. Honestly, I had none, and having gone to school in Provo, Utah, I didn't know a soul in the big city, in the Big Apple. So it was tricky, and, I think I had in the back of my mind that if I didn't make it, I could go home and help with the family business. And then my mom passed away, and so that kind of became less of an option for me. And luckily things took off, because who knows what would have happened if I hadn't booked a couple of shows and got the ball rolling. But it's a scary prospect. It
happened, right? Who knows? And you hung in there. But when you were working as a missionary, which was a part of what you did, and you went to Brigham Young.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the path you thought you were going to take, or life just kept happening?
Well, sure. I mean, at the time, it definitely seemed like the path I was going to take. You're always a product of your environment, and I was, living in a very happy bubble and kind of going along with what everybody else was doing. And the thing that you do as a good Mormon kid is you grow up and you go on a mission and you come home and you get married and start a family. And that was very much the path that I was on. Yeah. It was an adventure. It was a great time of my life. I went to Ecuador on my mission and got to speak Spanish, learn Spanish, and live in that beautiful country for a couple of years.
Right. And they were probably very good to you and happy to have you there.
Oh, the loveliest people. If you ever get a chance to go to Ecuador, I can't recommend it enough. Just the loveliest people on the planet. It's
fantastic. But then when you came back, you started auditioning and working again?
Well, I just jumped right into school. I went straight from high school onto my mission. Mm-hmm. And then I got home kind of mid-semester school-wise, and I thought, well, I'm here, and BYU offered me a little scholarship, so I'll jump in here, and who knows if I'll stay. And so I started school, and then I fell in love and immediately got married, and so I just stayed at BYU until I graduated, and then jumped into working from there.
Yeah, well, it all sounds good. And but a lot of those climbs to get work don't happen so easily. So, but acting seemed to be the right fit initially.
Yeah, I always just loved it, and I had some facility with it. Probably having grown up with it and just kind of absorbing it through osmosis, but I think I was never very good at anything else, so it just seemed like the smart choice. If I could be a snow skier for a living, maybe I could have done that. That's the only other thing I'm any good at.
Yeah, but you have seasons when you're not working, so you would have had anxiety.
Probably.
So this worked out better. And along this journey, you met Audra McDonald. And how long were you with Audra before you guys decided you were going to get married?
It was about 5 years. Yeah, I met Audra in 2007, and we initially just had our kids kind of on play dates because we were both going through divorces, and our kids were the same age, and our kids got along really well. And then we started dating a little bit. And
were you working then? Was she working?
We both were working. Yeah, we met on a show. We were in the same show. It was 110 in the Shade at the Roundabout Theater Company.
Yeah.
And we dragged our feet a little long and eventually got married in 2012.
Boy, that doesn't seem that long. Today kids are engaged for like 10 years. That's
true.
It's a whole different time.
Right.
So, and you have a little girl together.
We do. Sally James. She's a wonderful little maniac of a kid. Huge energy and a huge, wonderful little girl.
Is she going to be an actor? Does she have the family gene?
Oh, she kind of does. I wish I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's such a tricky job.
What can you do?
But she just is full of life and loves to be at the center of attention. She's got a huge voice and a huge personality. So who knows? We'll see. I'm certainly not going to push it on her, but I think she could do it.
Right. But are your sons also, do they have the theater bug, or are they too little?
Not so much, and they're not so little anymore. They're in college now. I had kids pretty young. Yeah, my oldest boy's graduating from Virginia Tech this year in aerospace engineering, of all things. He's a brain, and then I don't know where he got it. Nope. He did it in high school and appreciates it, I think. I've got a younger boy that's a freshman at the University of New Hampshire, and my stepdaughter's going to graduate from Brown this summer. So we've got 3 older kids that are, out of the nest, and then little Sally at home.
Wow. And Brown is a good theater school. My kids all went to Brown. And,
did they?
Yeah, and it was they did a lot in theater and productions. And in fact, one of my kids lives in L.A. now, and he said it's like an extension of Brown.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The Brown kids, all waiting to be discovered.
Nice.
I know. But not like coming to New York. But think about how brave that was when you weren't hooked up or connected and you had years in between to say, should I, shouldn't I?
Yeah. And I think today for the kids coming to New York, it's even trickier because the cost of living has become so tricky.
Crazy,
an apartment in the city is so expensive. I don't know how I could have done it back in the day. I really just look up to the kids that have the guts to come to New York and make a go of it these days.
And it was when you came to New York, it was easier. I mean, you could find apartments, not easily, but you could. But today, it could be, a 9-floor walk-up, and it's ridiculously priced. I remember my first apartment was hanging over the Sailor Soldiers and Airmen's home, and it was a big walk-up, and it didn't have, I had, of course, a roommate, as most of us did, and I said to the landlady one day, well, we need 2 beds, we can't live like this. So she said, no problem, it was a bunk bed, and she came up with an axe, literally, and chopped the bed in half, and that was living in New York.
Yeah,
and we didn't think a thing about it. Just come up, chop off the half, and you're set. So it's fun. Now tell me about A Beautiful Noise. And were your agent called you, or you knew about it, and how did that happen?
Well, it was interesting. I was actually I was workshopping another musical, and the producer was the Ken Davenport, the same producer as the Neil Diamond musical. And after our presentation one day, he came up and said, hey, word on the street is you do a pretty good Neil Diamond impression. I said, that's true, because I'd done some Neil Diamond kind of party trick songs in cabaret or something, because I've always been able to do Neil Diamond pretty well. And I guess word traveled to him, and he was putting the musical together. He said, well, we're putting a show together. We're doing a reading. Would you be interested? And I said, Ken, I've been waiting for the Neil Diamond musical my whole life. So that's how it came to me, and I ended up doing the development with it. And the
how long did that take?
Well, unfortunately, way too long, because we started developing it right before the pandemic. We did a reading in early 2020 rather, and Neil Diamond came and watched it. It was the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done in my life, to sing Neil Diamond in front of him. And we got a green light. We said, all right, this is going to happen. And then the world shut down. And I just thought, well, this is going to go away and we'll never hear from it again. We didn't know if theater was going to come back, let alone this project. And then thank goodness, the world is kind of slowly coming back together, and we got to workshop it and get it to Broadway. Thank goodness.
Yeah, because a lot of plays that went through that didn't make it. But Broadway feels good again. It feels like it's solid and here, and there are big audiences, and they're so happy to be there.
Yeah, it's a great season. I think a lot of the shows that got put on pause during the pandemic were able to come back, and most of them are kind of opening right now. And as a result, it just seems like a very full season. There's so many beautiful, brand new original shows, and lots of great revivals, and huge stars on Broadway. Just about every theater is full, and it just, thank goodness, it just feels wonderful to be a part of it this year.
Yeah, and it is amazing when you think what everyone has gone through, and the theater. Who thought that it would come back roaring like it's doing, and people waiting online for tickets. I love that when you walk in the West 40s, and they're sometimes around the block, and it's just, thank goodness, because without theater, we need it. It's the heart of New York. That's why people come here.
It sure is. I love it. And it's great to see the theaters full again. It's just terrific.
And how do you deal with a young child with you working all the time? And Audra had been in a play. So,
Yeah, it's not very easy. I'm not going to lie. It's the trickiest part of our lives is kind of figuring out how our childcare is going to go. And when Audra's show was running, it was even trickier. But we've got a good, team of folks to help us out. Audra's mom lives next door, which is a tremendous help.
Yeah.
And so far we've been able to make it work.
Yeah, no, it's perfect, and everyone dreams of getting the perfect part and everyone working, and yet there's always so many obstacles. Well,
it is tricky, and the theater schedule is not necessarily conducive to being a great parent because you're not home at night. So that's tricky. When you're home, when you're off of a show or not working, it's great because you have, all day, every day until your next project starts. So it's tricky.
Does your daughter accept it, or does she not quite get why mom and dad are both gone at periods of time?
Well, I think she understands why we're gone, but because our schedules are somewhat, irregular, she there's been times where she's gotten used to both of us being home all day, and then we suddenly vanish, and she goes, "Hey, what was going on here?" So I think she's a little confused sometimes as to why we're there and then we're not there. But I think
works
she understands.
out.
Yeah,
it's good. Well, thank you so much, Will, for coming to visit. We love A Beautiful Noise. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And it's real. All the wonderful songs are in it. So it's a joy. And that's just what we need. Say hello to Audra, and I look forward to talking to you again.
I will. Thanks so much, Joan. Great to talk with you.
Bye, Will. You too. All right, everyone. Doesn't Will Swenson have that voice, a wonderful voice? And he does a really great job. He's a terrific Neil Diamond. And I love the fact that it was in his head from the time he was a kid. His father loved Neil Diamond. And that his son ended up in a hit Broadway show playing him was just a really nice story. And of course, married to one of our favorites, Audra McDonald. But theater is back, really back. It's a great time to go to see. There are amazing shows. A Dollhouse, which is on Broadway. It's got Oscar winner Jessica Chastain in it. She is a superb star, and we liked it. You've got Parade, Ben Platt, and Michaela Diamond. Again, a star-studded play. Bob Fosse's Dancing. Everyone is excited to see that. Unbelievable dancing. His daughter, Nicole, produced it. Nice, right? She came back and she's doing it, and the talent is great. And I have a lot of people who went to see Shucked, and it's true, it is about corn, but people are laughing so hard they just can't stop. And you see that in a lot of things that are on Broadway. The Peter Pan show, the audience was screaming with laughter. And it's a real farce. And people like it. Often, like a friend called me today, she said, I was going to go see Peter Pan because you said it was so funny, but the Times didn't love it. I said, forget that. If it's a farce, it's a spoof. If you like that, then you're going to laugh and have a good time. Forget about the critic liked it or didn't like it. It's one person. With the night I went to see that, the audience was honestly laughing so hard they were crying. So what are you going to do? Camelot is on Broadway now, and a great cast. I just mentioned Peter Pan Goes Wrong, and it's really funny And the company is the one that did the play that goes wrong. And they open doors that come off in their hands. I'm telling you, people are laughing a lot when you see that. And Fat Ham. The audience loves this show. So, if you're looking for something to see, take a look at that. And those are a couple of plays that people are excited to see. And not that hard to get tickets now. Broadway's back, but people are getting tickets. And if you haven't seen E. Juliet, that's something you're going to want to see. And of course, Kimberly Akimbo, not a brand new show, but worth seeing. And Leopoldstadt, of an important play and a serious play. MJ drawing in the crowds. Six has a new personality in it. Some Like It Hot. You've got a lot of stuff. And Sweeney Todd is back. The Demon Barber of Fleet Street in a great production. So what can I tell you? You've got a lot. So when you're saying, what should I do over the weekend? And you can go to the booth in Times Square and get a discount ticket. And I've been going to theater. I've been in the city on weekends, and I've taken myself off to some of these matinees, and they're really worth seeing and really great. It's a wonderful time to go to theater. My only complaint is, if you're not driving your car, a lot of people don't, and it's very expensive in these garages. I don't know what happened to the taxis, but they're not easy to get a taxi after theater. But a lot of good shows are available, and it's fun to go to theater and then take yourself for a very early dinner. You can go to Sardi's if you haven't been there in a long time. You can go to Joe Allen's or so. A lot of good places for an early supper so you get home nice. That's just a couple of thoughts on Broadway. I'm Joan Hamburg, and we'll have much more.